This band is dirty, mean, and mighty unclean. Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we're taking a look at the history of AC/DC. Brothers Malcolm and Angus Young formed hard rock band AC/DC in Sydney, Australia in 1973. After several early lineup changes, the first stable AC/DC incarnation consisted of the Young brothers on guitar, vocalist Bon Scott, bassist Mark Evans, and drummer Phil Rudd. And this lineup was formalized shortly after the recording of the band's 1975 debut. AC/DC's first album was the hard rock effort High Voltage.
Baby, don't go! Baby, don't go! Baby, don't go down to the rolling, you know you love me so, baby, don't go.
The harder-edged T.N.T quickly followed and generated several classic AC/DC tracks.
See me right out of the sunset on your color TV screen.
Throughout the 1970s, AC/DC made several television appearances that increased their popularity at home. In 1976, the group toured Europe and signed a deal with Atlantic Records. The label then released an AC/DC compilation called High Voltage internationally that same year. Because the band's previous two records had only been released in Australia, this collection introduced their material to other parts of the world. Next came the Australian and international release of Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap.
Dirty deeds done dirt cheap. Dirty deeds done dirt cheap.
The 1976 album was only officially issued on American soil 5 years later, when AC/DC's success was at its height. The band produced several more albums before decade's end. 1977's Let There Be Rock was their first to chart in the States. The next year saw the publication of the even harder Powerage, with Cliff Williams replacing Evans on bass. AC/DC supported this LP with shows outside Australia, and these performances showcase the members' wild and mischievous side. However, it was 1979's Highway to Hell that really changed things. The Mutt Lange-produced effort featured the loud riffs the band was known for, and was their first record to sell over 1 million copies in the US. Unfortunately, tragedy struck the next year when, on February 19, 1980, Scott died from alcohol poisoning. After some deliberation, the group decided to go on without him and eventually chose Brian Johnson as their new vocalist. Johnson's first album with AC/DC was 1980's Back in Black. Produced once again by Mutt Lange, the LP topped British charts and hit the 4th position on the US Billboard 200. In fact, Back in Black became AC/DC's biggest album ever, and was second only to Michael Jackson's Thriller as one of the best-selling albums of all time. It yielded hits like Hell's Bells, You Shook Me All Night Long, and the title cut, and turned AC/DC into one of the biggest hard rock acts of the era. Later that year, the band released the live concert film AC/DC Let There Be Rock. Next year's For Those About to Rock, We Salute You was their first album to top the Billboard 200 chart. Unfortunately, their next two records, Flick of the Switch and Fly on the Wall, were critical and commercial disappointments in comparison. After Who Made Who, the movie soundtrack for Maximum Overdrive, AC/DC found commercial success with the 1988 LP Blow Up Your Video. But it was The Razor's Edge in 1990 that really signaled their comeback. The record peaked at number 2 on the US charts and helped the band regain some of its old popularity. Following the release of the album Live, AC/DC contributed to the movie soundtrack for Last Action Hero in 1993. Their next studio effort, Ballbreaker, dropped 2 years later. The top 5 disc marked Rudd's official return on drums since his dismissal in the early 1980s. AC/DC opened the new millennium with the top 10 album Stiff Upper Lip.
With a stiff upper lip.
Soon after, Sony Music began releasing remastered versions of their back catalog. In 2008, the group's music appeared in the video game Rock Band 2. That year also saw the release of the chart-topping Black Ice. It became one of the year's best-selling records and was supported by a successful world tour. In 2010, AC/DC released a compilation album which served as the soundtrack for Iron Man 2. Thanks to their thunderous power chords and dynamic performances, AC/DC is one of the biggest bands in hard rock and heavy metal. They're also one of the best-selling groups in history and have forever changed the sound of rock and roll. And for that, we salute them.